Hello, gamer. That being singular was not a mistake. I'm talking to you, right there. Do you want to play an extremely mediocre survival horror game that doesn't stick out in the slightest that you will forget about in an hour after playing it? Then go play the Resident Evil 3 remake. If you want to play one that takes the genre in exciting new directions using abstract story structure, then go play Signalis. If you want to play one that's decent and has enough new ideas to have its own distinct identity, then we need to move on to the topic of this video. This is Crow Country, created by SFB Games, who created this game, Tangle Tower, a point-and-click detective game. I know I said in the last video that Billy Basso going from working on Mortal Kombat to the 2D Metroidvania Animal Well was a jump. Try going from a detective game to an isometric survival horror is honestly not as much of a stretch than the former. I'm filming this part while I'm editing and doing even more research. This company made snipper clips. Focus camera, please. Focus. Focus. Snipper clips. Yo. You can see it's too blurry. I'll just put a fucking picture on the screen. You're not here to hear some boring development process. You want to hear the juicy bits like gameplay and story. Well, I can give you that. My first impression of this game's characters and story were not all that positive. Why did I have this reaction? Well, the first line I heard from Mara, the first thing that came to my head was cringe. Now, I do like to indulge a bit into cringe comedy myself, but I was worried right off the bat that she was going to be insufferable. I mean, just read some of these lines. Special Agent 4, that's me. Don't forget, don't mess it up. What I was thinking at the time could be summed up with, hopefully they don't talk like that the entire time. Thankfully, that wasn't the case, or maybe I'd just grown numb to it. It makes more sense once you get her full background. But wait, who's Mara, you're most likely asking? Mara was a special agent who was sent by the police to investigate Crow Country. Why did I put quotation marks around that? That's the true. Crow Country is actually the right place. She's here to find the owner, Edward Crow. It doesn't take long for Mara to run into some unsavory monsters. I will praise the monster designs right now. The way that they're covered in spikes and goop, all sorts of yuck. And the way some of them jitter, nightmare fuel. She comes in contact with a few different characters. Arthur, a random photographer that wants proof of the monsters. I don't really know why this man is even in this story. All he does is get rescued 5 minutes in, and then proceeds to sit in the car for the rest of the game. He was very unnecessary. He doesn't even have any sort of moment or any real personality. Julia Barron, a lawyer that was sent to find Crow so she can serve a lawsuit from a family of a girl that was attacked on park grounds. She is more important than Arthur, as in she operates a button. Through her, we learn more about the mysterious incident that caused the park to close down. Let's get into it. 2 years before the events of the game, there was an incident at the park where a 15-year-old girl, Elaine Marshall, was injured on Crow Country property. The reports say it was a wild animal, but she described it, saying there was a man in a cage that broke out and attacked. This caused rumors to spread about the park's safety and eventually led to its closure. Elaine's injury was a strange one indeed, as no matter what doctors did, they were never able to cure what they called a bacterial infection, even 2 years later. It's pretty obvious that the girl was attacked by the creatures that Mara is running into throughout the game. I do wonder what happened to Elaine though. It's been 2 years and no sign of getting better? I hope she's alright. Yeah, okay, fine. Let's not beat around the bush any further. Mara is Elaine. Shocker. I know. The game is not subtle in the slightest about it. Then why did she come back? Well, to figure that out, we have to continue the characters. So let's move on. Harrison James, a police officer who was in charge of investigating Crow County, but had his car broken into and his tire slashed, so he was late. He also has his badge stolen as well. I wonder who did that. I guess we'll never know. Douglas Pike, a man in charge of construction who, Tolman, I don't remember his first name, comes off as the creepiest weirdo when you first meet him, and he doesn't exactly make many good impressions. He was Crow's root excavation guy, whatever that means. The daughter of the main man himself, who's also looking for him. Finally, there's Marvin Trumbull, who is a businessman of sorts, who is supposed to be a junkie. I mean, just look at that man twitch. He's gotta be on something, right? Characters are done, so now let's figure out what's really going on here. You come across memos throughout the game from Trumbull that alludes to some shady shit that the two have been doing. Long ago, when Crow was a child, he and his father came across a green tail-like root. It moved like it was alive, and being interested in its biology, they cut it in half to see what was inside. As you can see, there's golden damn roots. With the prospect of riches on his mind, his father then bought the surrounding land, then called Contour County, before building the titular Crow Country. After his death, Crow then took up the mantle and started the excavation of the roots for their gold. Crow and Thrumble came up with a plan to sidestep the US government by buying a run-down gold mine in Brazil. That way, they wouldn't question the fact that they'd somehow come across a shit ton of gold all of a sudden. They even went as far as to grind the tubes of gold into pieces, then folding them into rock so it looked like gold ore. But you know the US government's going to do what the US government's going to do, and then they got sussed out. So now Thrumble's on the run back to Crow Country in hopes of finding Crow so they can figure out a way out of their predicament. And that doesn't end well for him. So where did the creatures come from? Or, as Crow calls them, guests. After a while, they eventually found the source of the 7 roots, which was this green pool. There they found the first guests, who they left in the holding cells in the park. And in case you couldn't tell, this was the man in the cage from earlier. Back then the guests were not as mutated as they are now. And why is that? Because the roots acted as antennas to direct people through the pool to this new time. Yes, did you expect this story to have time travel? No? Well, here we are. As Crow continued to cut more of the roots, the mutations became worse and worse until they became the creatures you fight now. How did he know what the pool's purpose was? It's because the first guest that came through could speak, and he told Crow the reason for its existence. Despite this, he continued to excavate and caused more mutations because of his greed. Now we're here in the modern day. Eventually Mara, or Elaine, whichever you prefer, will get to the bottom of what's happening here. Quite literally, as this game ends deep under the park in a laboratory. Like every other good survival horror out there, on the way she'll meet Toolman and Trumbull, who wants to get rid of her because she knows too much. That leads to probably the funniest death I've ever seen in one of these games. Anyways, after an extremely long ladder climb down, she finally meets Crow, where he divests the information about the guest, as well as why he refused to pay her medical expenses was because she could not be cured of the infection caused by the guest, and how everybody that comes in contact with them is also infected. To atone for these sins, Crow's been working extensively to find a cure, and he did, so he wants Elaine to take the cures back to the surface. As one final request, he wants her to kill him after he tries to see what's inside the portal, even though he knows that it will mutate him into this thing. He must do it for science. Afterwards, we see the gang hanging out wondering what's next. And that's it. What's up with these games I've been playing recently having lackluster endings? Overall, I'd say I enjoyed the story here. It's pretty simple to understand, and I like all the ways the game pokes fun at survival horror game tropes, like being blocked by this velvet rope that's able to be easily moved, where it'd be a serious blockade in other games. I enjoy its atoning for sins of the past themes and trying to make right what you did wrong. It has its moments of get the fuck out of here sort of stuff, like when Julie gets pulled into the vents and she ends up safe, and Toolman says something along the lines of, they're just trying to communicate, but they don't want to kill us, which is insane to say, well I'm pretty sure they do want to kill us. What have the enemies been doing all the game then? Unless they need your blood to write messages. Wait, if they're writing on the walls, then that 2106 must be related to them. Maybe that's the year that they came from. I'm so sorry I doubted you, Toolman. You're definitely not a creepy weirdo like I said earlier. But wait, if Elaine broke out of the hospital, where'd she get this car and all this handgun ammunition, considering she's a minor? Is it a joke about how fucked up gun laws are in America? This game takes place in Atlanta, Georgia, by the way. I guess these sorts of questions will always pop up if you try to think critically about it. This game has a time-traveling green pool, so maybe it'd be best if I don't think too hard. I've not talked very much about survival horror games on my channel, other than my first ever video, which you should 100% not watch. I am attuned with the survival horror community. As in, I've played all the mainline Resident Evils and Silent Hill 2. So, I know what I'm talking about when it comes to these kinds of games. You might have also noticed that the runtime for the rest of this video is much shorter. Well, that's because, in terms of gameplay, pretty box standard. Overall, I'd say the puzzles are where this game really shines. The gameplay otherwise is what you'd come to expect from this sort of game. You navigate the park looking for items to solve puzzles to clear the way. Most of them are of the logic type, where you have 3 or 4 disparate facts, and you gotta find a way to connect them to solve it. They aren't the most mind-bending to the point where you would be spending hours trying to solve them, however. That doesn't mean that they're all pieces of cake. There's a few stumpers here and there. Just a few. I'm not surprised that this is the case considering the other games in their back catalog. you come across 4 different weapons. The basic handgun, a shotgun which is pretty much a better handgun, a magnum which is an even better shotgun, then the flamethrower, which I used a total of twice. Once to burn down the store, and I used the rest on the final boss. You can also pick up grenades that are good for taking out bigger threats. And you also have the classic exploding barrel that you can use to blow up enemies. The weapons don't really feel all that distinct, besides the flamethrower. When you use a shotgun in these games, you expect it to have some sort of wider shot that can take out multiple enemies if you aim it right. That's not the case here. It's more of a big blast to a single enemy sort of shotgun, and the magnum is a magnum. The movement here is super smooth, so it's easy to run around enemies. You have complete control over the camera as well, so you shouldn't get blindsided by enemies behind corners very often, unless they're really small and hard to see. If you do that, however, enemies don't disappear, so sooner or later it's going to start to pile up, so you might want to end up using some of that ammo that you have stashed away. I only died a grand total of once, and it was a stupid book trap that I had no clue about, so it felt very cheap. I did find a memo talking about it on a playthrough I did after, so I guess it's on me. The enemies can range from small and quick to large and slow. The small ones are really the only ones you need to worry about. The bigger enemies that I assume hit hard are so lethargic that if you do get hit by them, it's your own damn fault. Screw the enemies, the real danger here is the traps that are placed everywhere. It really sucks when you run into a room you cleared out earlier, and there's just some random chandelier trap that lands on your head, which in some ways is pretty funny, but also aggravating, although you can use them to your advantage sometimes. The item economy leads much on the easier side. If you have a keen eye for this stuff, you can max out on handgun and shotgun ammo, normal and large medkits, and antidotes quickly. I very rarely ran out of ammo for those weapons, unless it's the big ones, like the magnum or the flamethrower. Gasoline for that weapon is so scarce that you pretty much need to get used to only using your handgun or shotgun. There was only one time when I was running low on ammo. It's mostly because I didn't get the shotgun until way later than I was supposed to. See, to get the shotgun you have to shoot these fish to reach a score of 21. I went up to the controller and it said it was broken. So I was like, okay, I need an item to fix this. So I didn't even think about just shooting the fish with your actual gun. Normally in these games you want to conserve as much ammo as possible. So I figured, it's probably not that. I'll probably get that item to fix it. I realized something was wrong when I ended up maxing out on the number of shotgun shells you can carry. I was saying to myself, okay, I must be doing something wrong. I have all this shotgun ammo and nothing to shoot it with. But no, you just shoot it. So it took a lot longer to get the shotgun than it was supposed to. So yeah, don't be dumb like me and make that mistake. It also drops the ball in terms of inventory management because each different type of pickup has its own slot, so you'll never have to make a tough decision on whether you want to take ammo or healing. The game even gives you an infinite source of handgun bullets, which are in the trunk of the car at the start. I guess they're not exactly infinite considering you have to trek all the way back to the car if you need more, but it's way more than you'd normally get in these sorts of games. Besides ammo and healing items, you can also find secret upgrades for your weapons, healing potency, and running speed, which ended up being the best upgrade by far. Being able to maneuver around enemies quicker will always be useful, and it always lets you run into traps much quicker. With all that, I believe that is this game's biggest flaw. In between the puzzles, this game can get kind of boring running around trying to figure out what to do next. Everything is told to you through memos, so if you don't have a very good memory, finding where certain things go can be a hassle, as you don't have all the memos on your person at all times. You need to go back to a safe room for that, which I'm not a huge fan of. Seems like busy work. If you forget something, you have to trek all the way back for a refresher. The graphics do nail the PS1 style that they're going for, so much kudos there. So if you enjoy that style, you'll have something nice to look at the very least. The soundtrack was giving me heavy Resident Evil vibes, so if you're a fan of that piano, synth heavy music, then you'll have much to love here. And in the end, if you still find it too difficult, there's always the exploration game mode, which allows you to play the game without being attacked by enemies. And there's also the hint crow, which gives you sometimes useful, sometimes worthless hints to help you on your way. Now you have no excuse but to play this game. While I think Crow Country is a bit stale on the gameplay side because of its easier difficulty, it can keep your attention with its interesting puzzles, not to mention the promise of a hard mode coming at some point in the future. And you guys know how picky I am about survival horror hard modes specifically. So if the difficulty really is that much of a sticking point for you, I'd suggest you wait until the hard mode is released. So if you're a survival horror novice or a horror buff, give it a go. It's everywhere. PS5, Steam, Xbox, so go nuts. Sorry, Switch users. Wasn't I supposed to be like assassinated or something. Oh well.